Okay, I can't reach that, so I'll just go. Good morning. I'll call the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority monthly November meeting to order. I have no items from the chairman. As such, I am Vice Chairman Barney Sentner. Chairman Kaufman is unable to be here today. Next item on the agenda is citizens to be heard, and we have one citizen. If you could go ahead and come to the microphone and thank you.
It's kind of short.
Yeah.
Podium's a little short for me. Thank you for your time. My name is Ryan Myers. I own Transit Advertising, Inc. For the last 7+ years, Transit Advertising, Inc. has had the pleasure of representing Cotpa with regards to advertising on the buses, inside and outside, for Embark. We've done so with dignity. We've appreciated the relationship and have been honored to be able to work hard to satisfy the requirements. During this period, we've seen upturns and downturns in the marketplace, experienced record highs and lows in the oil market as well as in the state budgets. One constant remained. Every morning, the staff at Transit Advertising, Inc. woke up with one objective: to sell advertising space in Oklahoma City for you guys, to generate as much revenue as possible. We represented Cotpa in a dignified way, in a professional manner, and over the period of time have done so to the tune of over $2.6 million in revenue generated. The quality of our finished products, the wrapped buses, has never been better, and as of right now, we're at historic lows as far as inventory available to advertise on. In fact, we've experienced a 41% increase in sales over this time last year. So for these reasons, among others, I was at a loss to see why we would be recommended to no longer have the contract with Cotpa. On your agenda today, item 6A, award contracts regarding transit advertising. I would like to make the following motion. I would like to respectfully request that we table the decision by the trustees with regard to item 6A until the formal protest process has been completed. We were notified 10 business days ago that we were no longer going to have the contract after a 4-month RFP process. We believe that at least finishing the formal protest process is a reasonable request. Secondly, I'd like to recommend a thorough review of the Cotpa competitive bid process with regard to this RFP, specifically 2 items: the requirement for a $10,000 annual contribution to the Employee Recognition Program, and a $25,000 annual media trade request in the RFP. These pay-to-play requirements, which is really all they are, pay-to-play requirements. Media trade makes an assumption that something's going to be returned in value for the media provided, which isn't the case. Because of the fact that this process would be reviewed, I'd like for it to be done, considered to be done by the trustees as more of an impartial party to the RFP process versus the people that actually created the RFP and submitted the RFP. I know that this pay-to-play requirement had an effect on who participated in the RFP and the weight of the evaluation of the RFP. Finally, following the events that I've requested and its conclusion, whatever the decision by the Board of Trustees, I would ask for an implementation over a 45-day period for transition process be done. We were given 10 days notice that after 7.5 years, the last 4 months were done on a month-to-month contract with the understanding that the transition process would be long. we were given 10 days notice of a transition, and that, quite frankly, is not enough. So once a conclusion has been made, I'd request a 45-day transition period so that we could adequately and effectively transition over, depending on what your recommendation is at that point. I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Myers? If not, we'll consider this in the order, not right now, but we appreciate your comments, and if you're not satisfied with and have further questions about our selection process, we do have an established protest procedure that you've been provided.
Yes, sir. And we're in the middle of that protest procedure right now, which is why I think it's a little premature to be making a decision on item 6A until that protest procedure has been completed.
And I understand you were provided with a response to your protest letter yesterday.
And following protests, there's a formal protest as well that we'll be filing next.
There's a provision for an appeal.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And as a trust, we've designated staff to make the final decision regarding protests. So I encourage you to work with our staff, and I'm sure Jason or somebody from the procurement staff will be glad to meet with you after.
I know that Jason is a perfectly reasonable person, but part of the appeals process will be with regards to items that were actually written and communicated by the people making the recommendation to the board. And so I understand that objectivity is a question when the person being questioned is the one that actually wrote the provisions of the RFP, which is why I've requested respectfully that the Board of Trustees consider taking a bigger part in the process, and especially with regards to the contents of the RFP and how that affected the competitive process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other citizens to be heard? If not, we'll move to item 4, which is approval of the minutes for the Cotpa meeting of October 6th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Move approval. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. And we'll move to the consent docket. There are 3 items on the consent docket. Is there any item that any of the trustees would like to have pulled from that and considered individually? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent docket?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, now we're to item 6, starting with item A, which is the award of the contract to How Transit Advertising for advertising, sponsorship, and naming rights services. Estimated revenue of $240,000 annually for transit advertising, and 75% of the net annual sponsorship and naming right revenues, to begin November 3rd, 2017, and extend for 5 years. Jason?
Yeah, I have a few comments on this item. We actually issued the RFP for naming rights and sponsorships back on May 31st. If you'll recall at that time, we were looking at our entire family of services and how we could best leverage not only advertising but also sponsorship and naming rights to generate revenues for the system. And we actually put that procurement together in basically 4 projects: bus advertising, Spokie's advertising, parking advertising, and then naming rights and sponsorships. We went through the selection process. We actually ended up having 6 different proposers for the process. We determined we really had responsive bids only on the bus advertising and on the naming rights and sponsorships. We then the selection committee then further narrowed those down to 2 finalists, Transit Advertising and Hauk Advertising, who both had opportunities to present and answer any of the committee's questions. And through that process there, the evaluation and the personal or the interviews, the committee chose to award the contract to Houck Advertising. And that's the recommendation that's before you today. We did have a base, we did in the RFP request like a base guaranteed amount of revenue. Houck Advertising proposed a minimum with the first year of $240,000 for the bus transit advertising, with an escalation built in, as other proposers did as well. And then with the naming rights and sponsorships, they proposed a 75% revenue share. So in other words, Cotpa would receive the 75%, Houck as the advertiser the 25%. Not different too much than how we do bus shelters, for example, where we have different revenue splits. So with that, the contract, if awarded, would be 5 years with renewals.
Okay, is there any comments or discussion? As I understand that this procurement procedure is the same one we use for all of our contracts, and it's modeled after what the city uses in their contracts, I believe, and we work with the city procurement office to navigate through the technicalities.
We have a standard template we start with on all of our requests for proposals. The scope of work, depending on the project, of course, varies. We do use the city's BidSync electronic bid system and the selection process, where we establish a committee and let a committee decide collectively through a scoring process on who the best qualified proposer is.
And the municipal council's office has reviewed the terms of the contract, what's included, and has approved that.
We have,
Okay.
or I have.
Right. And were any of the questions that were raised today raised during the interview process or prior to the selection?
I'm sorry, what's your question?
So any of the questions that were raised today in terms of the terms of the contract, the terms of the agreement, questioning whether or not that should be included in the process?
No, everything was fair and on the upside. All the proposers came in with what they proposed. That's what an RFP is. So you have a wide range of proposals where they think you can get the best benefit.
And those terms that were included were part of the RFP advertising, all the terms that were proposed, that were included in these proposals were part of what we requested within the RFP process.
Yes.
So it was advertised for all bidders to be able to propose on that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I would add, I know the 2 points that were brought up that you may be asking about was, the 2 points that were brought up were the employee recognition program and the media trade. And the contract that you have before you with Houck does not include any funding for an employee recognition program. Those are things that obviously are negotiated when you get to, as we know, to developing a contract. So for consistency purposes, neither proposer that made the final list, the final two proposers, included employee recognition program funding, and both did actually include a certain level of media trade. So I felt there was some consistency there between the two finalists.
Okay.
I did want to speak to the selection process also. I served as a trustee representative on the selection committee, along with staff staff of Embark and also staff from the city manager's office. Without any demeaning of Mr. Meyer's service to the board, because we've used his contract for years with some success. I did want to say that the Houck proposal was much more thorough and much more encouraging in terms of the revenues that would be produced for the trust in the long term. And so that was the basis of the selection.
Did I understand that this contract has been on a month-to-month basis for the last 4 months?
I'm not sure the exact time. It's been month to month. I think it's actually been closer to almost a year, maybe more. Has it been 4 months? 4 months? Yes. Okay, my bad. 4 months.
So it's legal that we can end at the end of any month that we choose to do so. Is that
Yeah, in fact, I believe the extension read, I'm paraphrasing, but to the extent that it would be continued until a new contract was signed.
so there's no requirement of any number of days?
Right.
Okay, is there any more discussion?
The media trade portion, is this common in transit systems to have that sort of portion built into a contract? Is that where we're getting this, and how common is that?
I'll ask Michael to answer that question, but I will say, a lot of we took a really hard, fresh look at this RFP and looked at what other agencies, particularly agencies in larger markets than Oklahoma City, were doing and having success with. And media trade is part of that. As far as the prevalence and how many of the cities we reviewed that included that, Michael, do you happen to have an idea?
On a number, I couldn't, or a number, no. But I do know what we did is we solicited from other systems examples or sample contracts and RFPs from systems from all over the country. We also spoke over the phone to talk about the various terms and what added value type programs have you been able to successfully implement. We were looking for a way to help supplement the ability to communicate the benefits of transit. And so that was one of the emphases for including that as part of the consideration for the scope of work. And so, yes, we did find in other transit systems around the country where this has been successfully implemented with varying levels of what was committed.
And then simultaneously, and this is to Laura's point from the process, the idea that this sort of advertising would generate the revenue that we're requesting to be generated on an annual basis, is that also based on other projections and other agencies and other cities across the country?
Make sure I understand your question.
So in other words, when we say that they are, there's a minimum annual guarantee in terms of advertising that we'll get $240,000.
So what this does is this allows us to plan with a set amount of money and budget accordingly. In the past, we have only received a percentage share of whatever the net was sold. And so we didn't know from year to year how much that would be. So a lot of other systems, is something we learned too, required a minimum annual guarantee. So is either this set amount and or 60% over or 65% over, whichever is greater. But at minimum, that allows us to budget around the 240 or whatever other that number system may have. So it gives us a little more assurance of what we can work with.
And then to our citizens' argument, he's suggesting, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, so feel free to correct me, suggesting that that annual minimum guarantee actually would have prevented some other advertisers from even submitting a proposal because maybe they would think that they wouldn't be able to generate that revenue. Am I understanding that correctly?
No, sir. If I could address that question. The annual guarantee was not at question. In fact, Transit Advertising Inc. proposed a $250,000 for first year versus HALC's $240,000. The question was with regard to media trade and the requirement of $25,000 a year of media trade, and so that the proposed or the chosen company would be required to provide Embark $25,000 in free media, presumably in trade for something. However, the only thing there is to trade for is the contract. So it's that pay-to-play aspect of the RFP requirement that I said limited the number of people that actually submitted proposals with regard to the RFP. I know that to be a fact. I know that there were companies out there that said there's no way we're going to pay to play, we're not going to, and they didn't. And in fact, we recommended, even though we never had a formal proposal process. I was communicated to that I would come in and answer questions, and that additional questions that were raised from the RFP and the proposal that we submitted, but we never did a formal proposal process where we came in, talked to the board about Transit Advertising, Inc., et cetera. So that didn't happen. He said the top two, Jason referred to the top two, us and Hauk, but that wasn't communicated to me. I went in with the assumption that I was there to answer additional questions that were not answered or were to be answered more deeply from the proposal that we had submitted. So during that process, the question and answer process, not the formal proposal process, but the question and answer process, I submitted that in lieu of a $10,000 contribution to the employer recognition program, that we would spend that $10,000 on self-promotion for Embark and for advertising space, and that from there we could generate much more revenue with regard to the $10,000 invested in the project. I would rather spend $10,000 to raise $70,000 in sales. So the media trade part was part of the process of the pay-to-play that I questioned, and that is not common across the marketplace, because a trade insinuates that the other person is going to receive something in value. In this instance, the only thing of value was the rewarding of the contract.
Mr. Chairman, our RFP process is sent through the city's website, and it's very precise into what is expected in the paperwork and the presentations. And we do have a protest procedure that has been used before, and it is well established, and I would suggest that the protest procedure be followed, and this is not part of the protest procedure.
That's correct.
And
So
because
thank you very much.
I've got a question. If you could explain to me how the protest process relates to whatever action we might take on this item today.
The protest procedures basically allow anyone that submits a competitive bid or a proposal that feels the process was unfair, they can protest initially to the procurement coordinator. And upon receiving that response, if they're still not satisfied, then they can appeal to the administrator for a final decision. So if we award the contract, if the trust determines they're going to award the contract today, that doesn't mean we're not going to still go through the appeals process if an appeal is filed. So those are the options.
So under the terms currently, I mean, the way we'd approach, if we approve the contract now, it doesn't stop the protest period. I mean, protest. It doesn't process. I mean, protest process.
No, the protest procedure has layers, and the first layer is you appeal the RFP and the contract being awarded. The next phase will be if you appeal, it will be after the contract is awarded, and he will appeal that process.
So would we delay starting work with the other contractor until we complete the process?
That is an option.
Yeah, practically speaking, what we would do is if we received an appeal after today's meeting, we would advise Hauk, they were awarded the contract, that we have an appeal in process, and that we would need to hold off on any notice to proceed until that appeal is complete.
Okay, does everyone understand the procedures involved? And also the consideration of the item. So I would ask for a motion then to approve item A, the awarding of the contract.
Motion to approve. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number B, to adopt a resolution approving funding for Embark Employee Recognition Program with an estimated cost not to exceed $10,000 annually. Jason?
So we've had a little discussion about our employee recognition program already this morning, but as the trustees know, when we develop our strategic business plan, we identify the major issues or challenges for our organization. One of those issues that we've identified is retaining and training, basically a well-qualified workforce. So it's workforce development. And so, one of the ideas as we were doing our research and seeing what other, systems did in terms of contracts for transit advertising, we found where several systems had layered a employee recognition program in part of that. Well, we've heard this morning that our proposers, our two finalists for the advertising contract, were not interested in supporting a recognition program, and I think both made good suggestions. We'd rather invest that money in generating more sales, and you get more return that way. So we took that advice and we revisited how we might fund that employee recognition program, again, as a strategy to address one of our overarching issues. And so what we're proposing and asking the trustees for is consideration to basically allocate up to $10,000 annually of advertising revenue towards an employee recognition program. That revenue would only be allocated towards a recognition program when and if we achieve that minimum base, in this case $240,000 on the contract that was just approved. So in essence, it could fluctuate from year to year, but the program would only be funded if we had excess advertising revenue over our base.
So the program wouldn't start until we had a year's worth of advertising revenue?
Actually, what we would propose is to go ahead and seed the program, if you will, on a prorated basis. So for this fiscal year, we would look at a program of about $5,000. That would allow us time for our new advertising contract to be in place for a year, determine if we exceed that base and by how much, and then make the allocation moving forward. So the first year of the program, we would just support out of our operating budget.
And this does not have any relationship to the contracts at this point. The vendors are not involved in any way. It's just a decision that we're making independently.
That's exactly right.
Jason, could you talk a little bit about what the employee recognition program has in the past consisted of?
Well, as of recently, we haven't had a formal recognition program. Again, tying back to our strategic business plan, we feel like this is an important strategy to develop one. And what we have worked on to this point is a regular recognition program where it will consist of recognition on a quarterly basis of those employees that excel in their jobs and it would not be limited to just one division. We would look at different divisions, operations, maintenance, administration. We've talked about doing, kind of some ad hoc incentive campaigns throughout the year. So, for example, if we wanted to focus on customer service during a quarter, this would provide funding for an incentive program. So we're developing it. We've selected frontline employees from different divisions to help us put the recognition program together. But we're really to a point, before we can go much further and finalize, we need to have a funding source for it so we can keep that commitment.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I'm sorry, just real quick. When this became one of our a focus, right, and recognizing our employees, could you speak briefly as to why that is so important in a transit system that we would have something like that for transit employees?
Well, ideally, our employees are us. They are our organization. So attracting and retaining our employees, is one of our paramount goals. That's vitally important. And so when you think of how important our employees to our organization and to the community and the services we provide, we also have to recognize that there's a lot of competition, right, within our community for good employees like we have within our organization. And so an employee recognition program, I think you'll find, is something that is prevalent in many different types of successful organizations. But with transit in particular, it's key because let's face it, operators are difficult to attract and retain. They can work some early hours, they can work some late hours. We have basically 24/7 operations, which means we don't have just a typical 8 to 5 shift. That makes recruiting more difficult. So it's one of the many things I think that we need to do to continue to maintain our workforce, but I think certainly an important part of it.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion then to adopt the resolution to approve funding? So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Moving on to item number 3, a resolution authorizing the administrator to approve and release the request for proposal for a transit fare mobile ticketing system and fare inspection application with an estimated cost of $50,000 plus 10% of the fare revenue collected through mobile ticketing. Jason?
Excuse me. So as you're aware, since October, we've been working with 49's Technologies to help us with our overall fare study, taking a look at our current fare structure system-wide, as well as opportunities for technology to improve fare collection. We actually have our consultants with us this morning, and so we appreciate your attendance at our meeting. Thank you. I know we've had a very busy week working through some items with staff. So we're to the point now, if you'll recall, in August when our consultants presented recommendations. One of the recommendations in terms of fare collection was transitioning to an option where we had mobile ticketing. And subsequent to that meeting, the board awarded another contract to 49's to help us develop the specifications for that mobile ticketing platform and also to help us implement that mobile ticketing platform, because it is obviously a very specialized technical system that we don't have any experience with yet. And so upon award of that contract, again, staff and the consultant group have been working. We're developing those specifications. And so with the issuance of this RFP, the next step in the process would be to bring back a contract to the board for consideration to award to a vendor that provides that type of technology. Our goal and the reason we're wanting to get the RFP released as soon as it's ready is we would like to be able to pilot, or I should say select, a vendor early in 2018, pilot throughout the summer in anticipation of having it ready for Oklahoma City streetcar service towards the end of 2018.
Are there any questions for Jason? If not, is there a motion to adopt the resolution authorizing the approval and release of the RFP?
Move approval. Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Moving on to item number D, approval of change order number 2 to the contract with Pilar Contracting Incorporated. Cost of $5,323.48 and final acceptance for project for the transit center exterior remodel and place maintenance bonds into effect.
So with the approval of this item, we will conclude our enhancements to the transit center. Again, the change order that you have before you is our second change order for the project, just over $5,300. represents about a 1.94% increase. If you combine this with the previous change order, we've actually had a total of $38,937 in changes since awarding the contract, or about a 14% increase over the original contract amount. But again, pleased to report that the work is wrapping up, or I should say is complete. You'll notice their final inspection was conducted on September 15th, and there's a list of individuals that completed that final inspection. And so again, with approval of this item, we'll accept final acceptance and put the maintenance bond into effect.
Okay, are there any questions to this item? If not, is there a motion to approve the change order, accept the project, and place the maintenance bond into effect?
Move approval. Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, moving on to item number E, a public hearing regarding a change to the established boundaries of the ADA Paratransit Zone 2 and the addition of a ADA Paratransit Zone 3 and a Zone 3 fare. Michael, are you going to speak to this? Or?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So this is a public hearing regarding the proposed changes, as you mentioned. Earlier this summer, we proposed changes to both the Downtown Discovery and also to the Zone 2 ADA Paratransit Fare. From those public meetings, we learned that the Zone 2, that we wanted to look a little further at the impacts of that fare increase to those who use the service most. So from that, we delayed that process, and we had a focus group. That focus group allowed us to explore a little more what some of the core items or issues would be regarding the use of the service and an additional adder to that fare that was in place at the time. From that focus group, we were able to identify some options, and we looked at that, and staff now has presented this recommendation or proposed this to the group. We've had 2 additional pre-public hearing meetings, one on Tuesday, October 17th at the Transit Center at 11:30, and then also Thursday, October 19th at the Transit Center at 3:30 in the afternoon. In that process, we explained what the service changes would be and what it would be creating. What you see before you now is the Embark plus current Zone 2 structure. It's a little difficult to look at or see some of the lines here, but what you'll see is the green is what we call Zone 1, and that is the required 3/4 of a mile on either side of the route by FTA for the guidelines, so we're required to provide that service. And then Zone 2 is everything else within the City of Oklahoma City limits, which, as you know, is a very large area to cover. So what we've done now is we have proposed 3 zones. If you wouldn't mind progressing to that next one for me. Thank you. In those 3 zones, we have the required and the purple in the middle, and the lighter shade of purple would be the Zone 2. So that, in effect, is 3/4 of a mile to 3 3/4 of a mile off of a fixed route service. So that creates about a 3-mile zone, and then anything beyond that would be Zone 3, and that extends from 3 3/4 mile from a route to city limits, and that provides the same type of service but at a $10.50 fare versus a $7 fare that was previously, or what is currently in place now for the entire area.
And so the $7 fare would stay in effect for this new Zone 2 that's the
So Zone 2, yes. So what we're in effect doing is creating an actual boundary to Zone 2 and then creating a new zone with a new boundary for Zone 3 and establishing that fare. So this is, again, a public hearing, so what we would expect to do next is, based after this meeting here, we would take all the comments that have been received thus far and then bring a final recommendation to you at the December meeting for a January 1 implementation if approved.
Okay. Are there questions?
Yes, Michael, just a question. Could we go back to the previous screen?
Yes, sir.
So it appears on the east side of the screen, it looks like we go into Midwest City on our normal bus routes outside of the proper city limits. So that area that is in the green, even though it extends into beyond Oklahoma City, we would still be responsible for ADA coverage.
Yes, sir.
Is that
That's
correct?
federally required.
Now, what about, for example, I see just a little bit in the city of Moore, you know, in the upper left corner, that too would come into play.
Yes, sir.
But the other section, would any of those other outlying municipalities, would we cover their area through ADA?
We do not at this time, not under this plan.
Yeah. And I'm just asking for clarification. So unless they're in the green area, which is Zone 1, we don't provide ADA assistance or coverage to any outlying municipality.
Not through the Embark Plus program, no.
And for example, Mustang would be an area that has no bus route coverage. Correct. Okay, thank you.
But there are other cities within that Zone 1 area
Oh,
that
yes.
have coverage too, right? That are within that green area.
You're right, yes.
Like the village.
Yes.
Or Acres, Bethany, right.
A portion of Bethany, yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? If not, is there a motion to adopt a resolution setting a public hearing?
We're setting or holding it? We're holding it,
Holding it, yes.
so,
It says setting, but,
yeah.
okay.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, the same sign. Okay, it passes. Can I receive a motion?
So what we need to do is determine if there's anyone here that wishes to speak at this public hearing. We're holding a public hearing right now.
We are?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak about the issue of Zone 2 and the new expanded Zone 3? Okay, thank you.
So I just didn't want to skip it and then have to do it again.
Moving on to item F, could I have a motion to move item F to the heel of the docket in order to complete our meeting and then move into executive session?
So moved.
So it's been moved and seconded, and we need an individual vote, so.
Yes.
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 Okay. It passes. So we will move on to ratification of claims and payroll. Is there a motion to receive the payroll and vendor claims for the period from October 3rd through October 31st?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay, the financial reports. Jason, do you want to?
Yeah, a few comments for you on our financial reports. If you'd like to turn to page 2 on our budget to actual through 3 months, fiscal year ending September 30th, 2017. This is our transit operations. Again, just a couple of quick comments, because as you'll notice, our revenues are pretty much in line. Our overall revenues are right in line with what we had budgeted, and our expenditures are coming in slightly under, so those are both positives for us. On the operating revenues, I'll just mention, if you look at the revenue line there for our sheriff fare program, you'll notice it's at about 126% of what we had projected. That might kind of jump out at you, although the amount's only about $3,600 over budget. We simply received a reimbursement 2 months earlier than what we had projected. We received it in September and had actually planned to receive it in November. So that's the main outlier for that, and then also the other passenger revenue category that you'll see, which also shows to be considerably over budget. So that's really just a timing of receiving our revenue earlier than what we had expected. So overall, total operating revenues, 99.9% of what we had projected through 3 months. Looking at operating expenditures, you'll see each of the expenditure categories coming in under budget, with the exception of other services and fees, which is essentially right on target or just slightly over at $6,800 over what we had projected. That leaves us with revenues in excess of expenditures of about $560 $165,000 through 3 months of the fiscal year. Looking at the next page, parking operations. Again, revenues are ahead of projection, and expenditures are under our projection. Direct your attention to monthly contract revenue and our transient parking revenue, both coming in over budget, which offsets a little bit of a decline in what we had expected in events, although events is pretty much about what we had expected through 3 months of the fiscal year. So total operating revenues are about 105% of what we had projected, or about $90,000 over our estimate. Operating expenditures overall are at about 95% of what we had budgeted through 3 months of the fiscal year. I would direct your attention to the parking garage operations, that very first line on the operating expenditures. You'll notice expenditures to date are right under $230,000. Keep in mind that's really only one payment for Republic's services. So again, I know I've mentioned it before, but for July we would have received the invoice in August. It takes us most of August to do our regular monthly report with Republic and reconcile all the expenditure reimbursements. And so again, just a reminder that although we're 3 months into the fiscal year, that just reflects really 1 month of garage operating costs. With that said, through 3 months, our operating income exceeds our expenditures by $1.2 million for our parking operations. On the next page, looking at our river cruises, again, expenditures and revenue pretty close to what we had budgeted through 3 months. Would direct your attention to total operating revenues showing to be just under $19,000 over budget. Part of that, or the main reason why that's over budget, is if you look at the last line there, the funding we received from the Oklahoma City Riverfront Redevelopment Authority. We actually did not budget to receive any of that revenue this year, and the trust we were fortunate enough for the River Trust to go ahead and fund that portion of our budget. So we're certainly appreciative of that contribution to help support marketing and such along the Oklahoma River. And then looking at operating expenditures, you'll see overall we're at about 98.5% of what we had expected. Operating income is $228,000 over. I'm sorry, our revenues are $228,000 over our expenditures. Keeping in mind, again, we do take that general fund subsidy. We kind of front load it. We've already drawn $400,000 of the $725,000 that were budgeted, so that will diminish as we go through the year and begin using those funds for operating expenses. And then finishing up with Spokie's bike share. Again, we'll start by looking at total operating revenues coming in about 6% over budget, and you'll notice that our bike share revenues are the main driver of that. $18,000 in actual revenue received compared to just over $11 budgeted. And you'll notice in the program report in the back of your packet that you'll see ridership is higher than last year. So we're seeing increased ridership and seeing additional revenue as a result. So a good thing. Looking at expenditures, we're under budget on expenditures by about $13,000. Total operating revenue exceeds expenses by $112,000. But again, just pointing out to the trustees that we did take our full general fund payment at the first of the year. So again, as we move further through the fiscal year, that surplus will diminish. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the trustees?
Just a comment. We're going to have a healthier city pretty soon. All these bike rides.
Just an additional comment. I think the numbers really are encouraging. Very sound financial report as the city still kind of crawls out of a economic downturn. So I would say it's a positive report, Jason. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to receive the financials for the 3 months ending September 30th?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So we'll move into our program reports. And so our first one this month is a transit system report. Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Good morning. Good morning, Vice Chairman. Good morning, trustees. Thanks a lot for having us. I'd like to touch on 4 topics of the September 2017 transit report: safety, ridership, on-time performance, and how we measure up to our year-to-date report card. We were responsible for 4 preventable accidents during the month of September. 3 of them resulted in approximately $900 worth of damage. One of them was $1,430 when we were going through Bricktown and impacted a very solid portable stop sign during a construction zone there, which of course, I'm not hiding behind that, but to go through Bricktown every 15 minutes with a 35-foot bus is a labyrinth. So in fact, one of our safest drivers encountered that portable, which means who knows where it really was. So there's that quick thing. We had 4 preventable or non-preventable accidents. 2 of them were significant, with a total of $23,000 between them. In one case, we were T-boned when a vehicle ran a red light. In another case, we were at a bus stop and completely stopped and someone slammed into the back of us. Now, there's one statistic I'd like to share with you, but I want Eugene Fritz to hold his ears because he's our safety guy, and as such uses everything he can, including metaphysical superstition, with regards to trying to keep us safe. My favorite statistic, Eugene? What was the word? We had 0 on-the-job injuries. And if you look at Eugene, you can tell that he's got in his left pocket a rabbit's foot, and in his boot, which is steel-toed, he has a pair of dice. But anyway, that is the absolute best statistic of September. Ridership, please look at the slide. You'll see that we had 10,914 compared to 11,507, which is a 5.2% reduction year over year. Looking into that a little bit deeper, what we've done is for the first time we have disincluded night service from our daily ridership numbers. And we do that because the disparity between the number of riders per service hour, and we can better quantify and analyze by doing that. Well, doing that in this month cost us 3.9%. So of the 5.2%, there's 3.9 explained. Also, we had 3 bad weather days compared to 2 bad weather days last September. I'm not trying to hide behind these, but that resulted in 0.8%. So the natural, real declination is less than 0.5%.
So let me be sure I understand. The 11,507 number from last year includes night service?
It did the previous year, yes, ma'am. Thank you for asking. And we're going forward, too, we're going to be doing that, so they'll be slightly skewed. But it really assists us in understanding the services because they're so different. And new night service, since we're talking about it, our new night service, we averaged 420 passengers compared to 415 or 17, which is a 1% increase. And when we compare year over year, there is a 5% increase year over year. And one of the interesting things is the statistics are now showing that the routes themselves have matured, because it's less than a 2% difference in the increase from route to route, whereas the immature routes would grow by 10, 20%. I'd like to say, by the way, that we would like to have another route so that we can have an immature route to keep going on, and I know that we don't have the dough for that.
I do have a question for you, Kevin. It appears that you're going to skip the downtown Discovery ridership, and that's a pretty steep decline. Is the new rate, the new fare in effect for that?
The new fare went into effect in September. So yes, that would have the September numbers would reflect the fare going into effect.
And the other question I have is downtown Discovery included in that first average weekly ridership, average weekday transit ridership slide?
The evening part of the downtown Discovery is not.
Okay, but daytime downtown Discovery is in that number?
Yes, it is.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to mention a couple things about the decline in ridership and our response to that. And the first one is that now that you all have given us these wonderful new buses, we're able to dedicate 2 buses to that route, and we're going to be able to then wrap those buses and really tout where they go. The second thing that we're going to do is put up bus stop signs that tout the downtown Discovery, because we've been moving them around so much that it's very difficult for our patrons to follow, with all the construction activity, streetcar and other things. So it's my hope that we more than overcome the reduced ridership from the, microeconomic reduction by the price going up. It's still a tremendous service. My hat's off, by the way, to the Bass Pro Shop, because they finally painted after a long time the lines that differentiate where they had 2 routes coming, or 2 lanes coming out, and there would be 1 car in the middle that would be blocking both of them. And so they just did that this last month, and my hat is absolutely off to them for that. On-time performance. Our on-time performance slipped 2% from 65.4% to 64.9%. And we are, of course, doing all possible to bring that up. Our report card. Our president, and I'll run through the percentages of achievement. Our number of passengers per service hour, we're at 96%. Number of passengers per operating day, we're at 88%. Percent of on-time performance, we're at 88%. Number of miles between road calls, we're at 74%. But I also want to thank you again for those. We have 9 buses on the street that we did not have in September that are now up. In fact, the maintenance, as Jason mentioned, the maintenance department got those buses on the street within 2 weeks of receipt, which is just an all-time world record, which is really helping us out. The number of vehicle accidents per 100,000 miles is 140%, which is not as good as I prefer 100%. And the number of passenger claims per 100,000 service miles is 106%. I'd be pleased to provide any additional information or answer questions.
I have a question. We received a grant not too long ago to allow us to purchase an electrical bus. And when will that electrical bus be available?
There's quite a backlog for them.
I see.
So we would not expect to probably receive delivery any sooner than a year, maybe even a year and a half from now. The low and no emissions program is one the FTA has been pushing and supporting, which is great. But as a result, there's more demand for these electric buses than what we've seen in the past. So there is a backlog.
Well, so I guess once that bus gets here, we'll pull it somewhere and plug it in overnight, get it charged up. How long can a bus run before you have to recharge it?
Yeah.
And when we use the term electrical, that means battery operated.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, totally electrical. And, time will tell. We'll have to test it on our routes and within our system to really see how often we have to recharge it. When we were looking at it early on, we determined, we certainly couldn't keep it out the entire service span, from first thing in the morning till midnight. Right. But we do think we can get through, the majority of our service span with a charge.
So 8 hours maybe?
Probably more than that. I mean, maybe 10. But again, it depends on, how much the air conditioner you're running and the demands are being put on the battery. So we'll have to test it. But at least I would say 1 charge per day.
How does the motor compare to, say, an engine in terms of acceleration and things like that? Similar?
No, it's basically instant because you don't have the engine transferring the power to the transmission. It's all.
So you can accelerate
there.
quicker.
Most likely, I haven't driven one, but or any bus for that matter. But, and that's probably a good thing for a lot of folks. But yeah, should be relatively more acceleration. The other thing that I just comment and give a hats off to our maintenance team, because this is kind of going to be kind of a one-off bus of sorts, right? It's kind of new technology for us. Well, they're already talking about taking the opportunity to also use this bus to try out different things. So anything from maybe a different choice of flooring to maybe a different seat manufacturer to whatever. So we can kind of test out some other components too, so even on future bus orders, we might be able to kind of reap the benefits of some experimentation on this single electric bus.
So the advantage of no pollution, but also no noise, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, we went on a couple of vendors brought their electric buses by, and they are just fantastic. So it's a wonderful technology, very expensive. The one good thing about the year is that the incremental increase in capacity for electric batteries is, every year seems to, hold value in terms of increase.
I will say that no noise component brings its own issues, because people can't hear the bus coming either. So you have to be extra careful when you're a driver of an electric bus to not run into people who would ordinarily get out of the way, but don't hear the bus coming.
Not unlike the Spokies. I was riding one at open streets, and you turn the handle, and it goes ding, 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 ding. Some little Spokies things on the steering wheel.
I think one last comment, if I could, on the electric bus too is, as technology continues to transition, I think this was part of what we had included in our grant application was just the ability to train our staff, our mechanics on new skills, because this is the direction a lot of transportation is going. So hopefully we'll be able to reap the benefits of that as well.
With your help, and it's just as I drive around, I see these new buses, and there are 9 new ones, and 2 more are going to be on the street in a couple of days. It is just fantastic. We got 49 buses on the street, and 11 of them are just these absolute showcases. So, so much has happened in the last, our operators, everybody, they're walking around with much bigger smiles because our equipment is so much better from you all buying those buses for us.
I don't know where those electrical buses are being deployed now, because I was in New York City this week and cannot recall seeing a single electric bus, but the traditional diesel buses, they're very thick up there. They've got quite a few of them,
right.
And but no electrical buses that I can recall.
There's not a lot of agencies that I'm aware of anyway that would have like an entire fleet, or at least at this point a large portion of their fleet as electric bus. I recall last time I was in Houston, for example, they had an electric bus or 2. They may have more now, but serving as their downtown circulator. So we would probably take a similar approach to where we'd be selective in where we used it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, final question then. Assuming we have a bus rapid transit route, would that be a good place to have an electric bus, or would it be better to have a traditional bus operating?
The answer is, either would work. I think we would be much better equipped once we have this first electric bus in place to determine its capabilities. I know right now what we have contemplated for the bus rapid transit is, the articulated CNG buses, but we're not locked into that. That could change, and as Kevin mentioned, if that project comes to fruition, the battery technology may be considerably better than it is even today, and that's something we look at. What we have noticed is there's substantial cost difference. It's almost like twice the amount for an electric vehicle than even a CNG or diesel.
Do we anticipate, once that rapid transit route comes into play, would that be an extended time frame including night service or just the traditional time frame? Or has that been looked at yet?
What we have looked at this point would be the traditional service span we offer up until midnight. So extended till midnight, right? Which, makes a lot of sense if you think about, one of the things that makes that corridor so, I guess, attractive or appealing for a rapid public transportation is all the employment, along that corridor. Not all of it is, 8 to 5, so.
Okay, any other questions for Kevin? Not, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Jesse, the streetcar report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hope everyone had a great October. Operations are continuing. October is a very busy month for operations. Biggest evidence of that is the continued graying in my hair. So, Embark and Herzog continue the review and development of the SOPs, safety and security plans required for the system startup. We are looking at the FTA coming to Oklahoma City for a readiness review May of 2018, and so we're finalizing those plans, preparing for that readiness review. We continue with our Rail Activation Committee, our Fire and Life Safety Security Committees, and our Safety and Security Certification Committees. With the help of Eugene and Molly in the Embark office, we've also set up subcommittee groups, working groups, to help those committees gain ground and move a little faster. Embark and Herzog also attended the FTA Joint SSO Rail Agency Workshop in D.C. Actually, Jason just got back from that last week. It was a great conference that allowed the FTA, the SSOs, and the agencies to communicate, give updates of the current projects, and talk about how to move forward in adopting the MAP 21 and 674 guidelines moving forward. And then also, Embark and staff, we attended the American Public Transit Association, the APTA conference, the first part of October. In this picture here, you can see the streetcar subcommittee. It's where all of the different streetcar agencies get together, discuss the current status of the projects, and discuss future projects, future ways to better the projects also. One of the cool things that we got to do while we were there was get a VIP tour of the Atlanta streetcar. This slide here shows the special route that they applied to the Atlanta streetcar.
It goes very fast.
It does. Got to keep that on-time performance for sure. Yeah. So one of the awesome things about Carli here is he comes from the Atlanta streetcar. So while we were there, we were able to get a VIP tour of the system, go inside the storage and maintenance facility, actually got access to the traction power substations, which everyone holds very valuable, super secure, because that is the lifeblood of the streetcar, providing power to the system. And so it was a great trip, able to learn a lot there for sure.
Can I ask a question? Yes. So the Atlanta streetcar, that's not the same as their, I'm going to call it a subway that
Correct.
Connects you, okay, that connects you up north down to the
Right.
airport, separate. Yeah. Is there streetcars limited to the downtown area?
It is, yeah. It's actually a little smaller than our system will be.
Okay.
Yep. So mainline track construction continues. This picture here is a picture near the downtown library where they demoed the street, did utility relocates, and then track installation. Our completion milestone there continues to hold at August of 2018. So the left picture here was same area showing the track boot installation being installed around the rail. What that does is that insulates the return current from the system, basically eliminating the current in the rail. And the picture on the right here is a picture of the embedded rail being installed. And you can see there, one of the things that we did during engineering was working with OG&E and utility services throughout the downtown area, was coordinating the manhole locations. There's several areas where we had to relocate the manholes, access points. So we either move them outside of the track slab or move them within the track slab. And the idea there is that we'll work through a policy through the city that anytime someone needs to access one of these manholes, we'll be contacted. We'll put out a spotter or a flagger, but still be able to maintain streetcar movement. Also, Bricktown construction continues. The Beeline construction continues. They're looking at installing OCS poles here shortly. This is the corner of Joe Carter and Reno. And this is, so I can explain kind of how this is going to work. The streetcar on Joe Carter will be in a streetcar-only lane. As it approaches Reno, it'll have a streetcar signal allowing it to enter back into traffic there. There will be so where you see the track here, it's streetcar-only lane. There will be what they call a pork chop, more or less an island out there to keep cars from following with the streetcar through that corner. And the completion milestone holds for March of 2018 for that area. And that milestone there will allow us to start testing the streetcars in Bricktown, the Bricktown Loop Beeline around March. Yes.
May I ask a question now? So the Beeline is predominantly in Bricktown, but it's the east-west route.
That's correct, yeah. The Beeline runs down Sheridan to Joe Carter, south on Joe Carter to Reno, and then it loops down around the park and then heads back north on Hudson.
How far west does it go to?
Just Hudson.
I see.
Yeah, it ties back into the D line there at Hudson.
Okay, thank you. Jesse,
Yes.
relatedly, would you mind going back to that previous slide, please?
I think I need help. Sorry. To go back.
Thank you.
Yep.
As you all are working with Carly, right, who has this experience in Atlanta, I remember as the Atlanta streetcar came online, it had a lot of bumps in the road, as it were. And one of the things that they talked about, so I'm just looking at the streetcar, how it's going to get back into traffic. What are some of those bumps in the road that Atlanta dealt with, and through your interactions with them, what are we doing to work to address them? One of them, from my own reading that I remember, is this, I know it's not a fun, exciting word, but signal prioritization, right? Making sure that the streetcar can actually, when it gets to these, well, you know what, why don't you explain that to us?
Sure, yeah, no problem.
So you're the expert.
No, you're fine. So the streetcar currently in the project has what's called TWC, train to wayside communication. What that does is it allows communication to signal boxes. There's several stops that have that. Mainly the wide sweeping left-hand turns are the ones that have most of the TWC. There's a few areas up in Midtown that have additional. For instance, they're on 4th Street in front of the bank. Most of our stops are near side stops, meaning you come up to the stoplight and then patrons, board the streetcar and then the lights change and you move forward. There's one stop up on 4th Street where it's a far side stop, meaning that you travel through the intersection, stop, allow people to board, and we have TWC communication there, so we pull up, stop, hold the green so that people don't get trapped in the intersection, and then as the streetcar pulls away, it allows people to get through the intersection before the light turns red on them. And then as far as signal prioritization, I'm speaking for the MAPS project here, the MAPS project is holding a contingency fund back of $250,000 to fund signal prioritization. What that means is once we begin testing, we'll be able to test the route, see which areas we need to have signal prioritization, and then implement signal prioritization in just those areas. The reason behind that is, for instance, if you put signal prioritization on all the lights on Broadway, you run the risk of turning all the lights green thinking that you'll get through all of them, but then you get traffic that comes into play, and then you end up getting red lights, and then it messes up the whole thing. So you got to test it and see which areas you need signal prioritization.
And the $250,000 from MAPS, that's for the testing, or would that be for the actual signal prioritization?
For the signal prioritization.
Wonderful. I love it. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, any other questions for Jesse? If not, thank you very much.
I've got.
Oh,
I got many more slides.
Your slides. I'm sorry. Not that I'm trying to rush you.
I can sit down if you want. No problem. So this is a picture of traction power substation number 1. It's off of Flaming Lips Alley there. It's on the southwest corner, turned around, the east side of the ballpark there. This is the first substation in the route. That'll be tested and commissioned. The other substation was substation number 6 that kind of powers the storage and maintenance facility. So this slide here shows the mainline track construction progress. Again, things are progressing very well. You can see 64% of the utilities are clear. That's the blue line on the map there. 47% of the track demo is complete. That's the orange. Obviously, if you see green, the track demo is complete. That's why you don't see much orange. The track installation, we're at 38% complete. OCS foundations, 37% complete. The station stops, you can see on the map there, the squares, I guess magenta squares, are about 18% complete. Those are mostly the Bricktown stops. And then the traction power substations, we're at, percentage complete there is way off. We are at 2 complete. We have the one at Flaming Lips Alley and the one at the storage and maintenance facility. And then the contact wire are at 10%, which is the contact wire installed along Hudson there. Storage and maintenance facility. Storage and maintenance facility is starting to wrap up. They're finalizing the final inspections on the inside of the building for the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. We have vendor training scheduled for all of next week, which is the vendor who installed the crane will come out and train personnel. Carly, our maintenance manager, will be videotaping that training also for future employees to help with the training. Track installation of the storage and maintenance facility is complete. That was one of the milestones for the Herzog-Stacy Whitbeck joint venture. And the current contract completion date is showed to be November 14th, which is right around the corner. So this slide here shows the progress of the outside. The top picture was October 2nd, bottom picture November 1st. In the bottom picture here you can see that the landscaping is installed, all of the windows are installed, the pipe bollards are painted, the flat work outside is complete, the site lighting is also complete. This is a picture of the Herzog-Stacy Whitbeck crew installing the concrete at the track, the embedded track out on Hudson leading into the storage and maintenance facility. So a couple days ago, I took a trip out to the storage and maintenance facility at night, took some pretty cool pics, I think. So what I want to do in the next couple of slides is just kind of walk around the outside of the building and explain the function of the building. So this is the front entry. This is where the public would enter the building. You can see there the vestibule that's controlled by access cards, so that you don't just have people walking into the building. We have to keep the building secure, obviously, to maintain security of the system. So someone would come up to the outside. There's what's called a talkaphone. You push a button, ring somebody inside, and we can buzz people in that don't have access control. Or if you have your access card, you can maintain or you can gain access to the building. So this is the service entry side of the building, the west side. Kind of walk through the entry doors here. You've got office doors in the office area, and then working south, you've got a personnel door that leads into the warehouse area, an overhead door for the warehouse area. Then moving south, you've got a pair of double doors. That's access to the lube room, which is where all the oil is stored, and also the compressors, the air compressors. Those doors are also maintained by access control, so we know who's entering that room and how long they were in there. Then moving south, you've got the overhead door for the heavy inspection bay, and then the personnel door for the heavy inspection bay, and then the overhead door that's open there is the wash bay. So moving around to the back side, you can see the lit area there is the storage track and wash bay, and then to the right of the screen, you've got the fire access lane. This will be fenced off, and we met with the fire department yesterday, and we're going to install the knock locks and Knox box that allows access for the fire department to make access all the way around the building to fight any potential fires. This is the east elevation where the vehicles will enter the building. I've watched you guys through it several times. I'm sure most of you know it by heart, but the right door there is a inspection bay, and moving to the left there is a heavy maintenance bay. Then left of that is the wash bay, and then the storage track. This is a picture of the inside, the service and inspection bay. I mentioned it before. Basically, the streetcar pulls in. You have access to the bottom of the streetcar, and then there's a mezzanine up top for access to the top of the streetcar. And then there's work platforms that allow you to get to the interior of the streetcar while it's in the inspection bay. This is the heavy maintenance track. Again, this is where the streetcar comes in. We're able to detruck the truck assemblies from the vehicle, take them to the turntable, wash them off, do service to them, or if we need to ship them out for wheel touring, we can run them out that west overhead door and ship them off if needed. And then this is just a closer picture of the wash bay and storage track on the south side of the building. Vehicle procurement, so I'm showing the latest dates that we have there. We're showing vehicle number 1 and vehicle number 2 shipping to Oklahoma City in January of 2018. This was a slip from October, mostly due to the storage and maintenance facility not quite being complete. We want to make sure that we have a place to put them once they do show up. Vehicles number 3 and 4 showing a delivery of February, and vehicles number 5 in March, and vehicle number 6 in April. And then this is a picture of vehicle number 1 testing. Again, I have to apologize. I guess the camera just automatically blocks out the color of the car. We'll just have to continue the anticipation of when the streetcar arrives. So that is it. That's all I got.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Are there questions?
One last question. So August of 18 is the estimated completion of the construction of the tracks.
That's substantial completion.
Okay.
Yeah. Final completion is looking to be November of 2018. That allows 3 months for testing and also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that leads to the question as to when will it be operational?
Right. So the schedule right now is showing that the system will be ready to be operational in November of 2018.
Any early access by the public, like with the B line, since that'll be completed in March?
No, and the reason for it, well, several reasons, but primarily we still have to do a readiness review, an FTA readiness review, and have the State Safety Oversight Office and FTA basically acknowledge that we've met all the requirements, particularly for safety. And when we do that readiness review, we'll want to do it for the entire system versus a readiness review for one route and then a second readiness review for another. So, I mean, that's part of the reason.
Well, what happens like if the Thunder goes real far into the playoffs? Does that change?
That would be April, May, and June.
Right.
Yeah.
This year's playoffs.
Yeah, of 18.
Oh, it won't be ready.
Yeah, we're not allowed to allow public on the system until we're approved by the FTA.
Yeah. And even for the vehicles, they need to be tested on the entire alignment, and we will be able to do that at that time.
Also, you said if the Thunder.
Well, I said if they go far, at what are they, 3-3 or 4-3? You got to be a little bit careful about getting too optimistic.
Now that's not to say we couldn't look and beef up the downtown Discovery, right? So we could through downtown with the downtown Discovery.
Well, hopefully the park's pretty well on its way as far as construction with that by then. Who's responsible for that?
Not Cotpa. Thank you, Jesse.
Definitely not Cotpa.
Okay, our third program report is the Special Services Report. Good morning.
Good morning. How is everyone? I think I'm going to have to talk to Jason about always having to follow Jesse, because, I just don't really have the great, awesome pictures and videos and stuff. Going to be a pretty short report. Most of the numbers I'm going to be giving you today will be comparing first quarter performance of the current fiscal year with last fiscal year. Okay, I'm not working with you. Thank you. So in our senior transportation, so far in the first quarter, we've provided just a hair over 9,500 trips. Now, the same period last year, we were at 11,500, so we've seen a drop. I've had a lot of people ask me why, and really all I can say is anecdotally, we are dealing with an older population, and we have lost some significant long-term users over the last year. So going forward with that, one of the things we've been trying to do is increase our outreach. So far since July 1st to the fiscal year starting, we've had 11 outreach events. These are things like the AIDS Care Luncheon. We went and did a presentation to them about all of Embark services. We've attended the Better Living Expos for seniors, health fair at North Care, as well as the Tinker Federal Credit Union health fair. And we also went to the National Disability Conference at the FAA to talk to people about transportation for employment. The other big thing that we are in process right now on our outreach is meeting with the police and fire departments. Our goal is to provide the frontline staff in those areas some small cards that are just real basic information about our senior transportation with the phone number. So that way, if they are out, they have a lot of contact with this group of people, doing welfare checks, making medical calls, things like that. So if they see someone in need, that way they can pass them along the card, and hopefully they will give us a call. We've also done something similar with our bus operators on fixed route. If they see someone that they think might benefit from senior transportation, they are turning in a report at the end of their shift and doing a referral, and we have somebody contacting that person to reach out to them about the programs. For homeless and low income, the first quarter we've distributed a little over 8,400 bus passes, done 95 emergency taxi rides, and almost 2,000 sheriff fare coupon booklets. Now that number is just for coupons sold to Oklahoma City residents. It doesn't include all the other municipalities that participate in the program. So altogether for our social services, which we include the senior as well as the homeless and low income for the first quarter, we provided almost 2,800 trips for individuals. Now for Embark Plus, last year, we ended last year at 51,800 trips. So far in the first quarter of this year, we're at 12,555. That's about a 6.3% decrease month over month for the same period last year. It is kind of fluctuating based on weather, also based on many, many other things. We've tried to do some analysis of our monthly ridership, of it going up and down, and we just can't find a pattern to it. It doesn't really match the weather. It doesn't really terribly seasonal. It just goes up and down. One of the things that we're really proud with staff is that we've been working with their on-time pickup percentages, and we have given them a pretty steep target to beat. And so far in the first quarter of this year, we averaged 93.5% of our pickups for paratransits were on time. And that's about all I've got for today. That's why I don't like to follow Jesse.
Any questions?
Just a couple, please. So when it comes to providing those passes for homeless individuals, do they go to the main station downtown to get the pass? How does that work?
That program works. It's with a partnership that we do through the city's planning department. It's funded by a community development block grant. So in January, February of every year, we pass out applications to social service agencies around the metro area, and they have to apply. There's quite an extensive application process where we evaluate so we don't have duplication of services.
Right.
And then we figure out how many total passes we have funding for, and we will allocate those out to those programs, and then they come and pick them up once a month. So they're actually the ones that are actually distributing the passes out to the homeless and low income. That way we can follow the federal guidelines, and we don't have to staff the people, checking poverty levels and things like that.
So, for example, somebody at the City Rescue Mission.
Correct. Yeah, City Rescue Mission, there's quite a few of them, the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
Most of the social service agencies in the city participate with us.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then just a comment to encourage you following Jesse. It all connects. Right?
Oh, I know.
You mentioned some of the unfortunate passings that we would have experienced recently. But as our baby boomers keep, and that population is huge, and as they keep growing, as that population grows and they age, aging in place is critical. And that's how,
definitely.
All of these services that we're providing, with the exception maybe of the Spokies bike, is going to be so crucial to allowing that generation and then the Gen Xers and then eventually my generation to age in place with grace and dignity and beauty.
That's correct. That's one of the big reasons why we've tried to push outreach. And, I've kind of challenged staff that, even in the wintertime when they're not having events and those type of things that we can sign up to go to, I still want you to do something. So that's why we've decided this winter we're going to do the push with the police and fire department. When we get done with them, the next thing is going to be the county sheriff's office, and then we're going to be reaching out to the social services areas of the hospitals locally.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a motion to receive our service reports? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Individual items from the trustees. James? Okay. David? Jason? Yes, okay. We will now move into executive session. So thank you all very much.